Let's begin with a word of prayer together. Gracious God, may the words of my mouth, the meditations of all our hearts, be pleasing and strengthening to you, our rock and our Redeemer. Amen. Can you remember a time when someone's judgment of you made you frustrated? When someone projected something on you that wasn't true about yourself, but you knew inside of you that's not who I am? Or someone just kind of decided to share the kind of faith that you should have, that they had the answers and you weren't necessarily where they were, and so you needed some help from their perspective. We all have particular memories when someone judged you, and sometimes those memories can linger for a long time. We sometimes don't forget those moments in our life. I can go all the way back to sitting in a Pizza Hut on the TCU campus, was sitting by myself, enjoying my personal pan pizza, when someone slides into the booth across from me. It wasn't, hello, what's your name? It wasn't any of that. They slid into the booth and said, have you found Jesus in your life? I'm going, in my mind, I'm thinking, really, this is happening right now? I'm having a pizza and someone slides in and says, have you found Jesus in your life? Well, I go to church. He goes, that's not what I'm asking. I'm asking, are you saved? I said, I think I'll be okay. And the person was very concerned about my life and clearly didn't know me from anywhere and made all kinds of judgments about me before he even really had a conversation with one another. And that memory still sticks with me. I mean, that was 1989. And I'm still can remember that moment. I can still remember that person sliding into the booth and making some judgments about my faith that they had no really business to make those judgments about. I also remember growing up, always had kind of a baby face, always had kind of a younger face. And in my first call out of seminary was serving a small church, worship about 75 on Sunday mornings. And we had some guests that day. I was all excited about the guests being there that day. And when the service was over, I went up to greet them, and they said, well, you did a really nice job preaching for a youth minister. When's the senior pastor going to be back? And there's inside of me, I'm going, I was the pastor. And, kind of there's that internal stuff that they judged me by the way I looked and by my age. And there's all this judgment that goes on. We get judged all the time, whether it's by our age, how we look, the color of our skin, who we choose to love. Judgments are made all over the place. And usually judgments are made either from a point of privilege, or they're made because they've been taught through the generations, through family and through mentors and parents and family systems. Or we just begin to say, well, if this person's like that, then everybody's like that. And we know that's not true, but that's how judgments begin to creep into our minds. Now, when God made an invitation to Jonah to go to the city of Nineveh to say, I think Nineveh's got a shot at redeeming themselves. They have a second chance at life here versus the path they've chosen. Jonah's response is, they don't deserve a second chance. Jonah starts out with judgment from the beginning, flees. As I shared 2 weeks ago, instead of going to the equivalent of Iraq, goes all the way to Spain to say, this is what I think about this message, God. And when Jonah finally relents and decides to go, the story is in the book of Jonah that it's a 3 days walk across the city. Now, to show you Jonah's reluctance to share a message with this town, he walks in 1 day's journey. It takes 3 days to get across. He goes in 1 day's journey versus 3, shares probably quietly, y'all need to change your ways, turns his back and walks out. I mean, he doesn't even get halfway into the city. He's, God, I shared the message with Nineveh and I'm out of here. I mean, Jonah clearly did not have any intentions of giving the city a true opportunity to redeem, to hear something forgiving and graceful and loving. Just from the get-go said this city doesn't deserve what God maybe thinks is possible in this city. Jonah leaves. As Maureen said, the community takes Jonah's words to heart. As reluctantly as they were given, the community received those words. They talk among themselves and saying, we have a real chance to start something new in our life. Let's do it. And God redeems that community. Now, Jonah's off to the side, and he's thinking, I knew it. I knew God would do this. God, you're so full of mercy and love, I can't stand it. That's kind of how Jonah's thinking. I kind of added maybe a little extra emotion in that maybe than what you read in the text. But my guess is that's probably the kind of way Jonah felt in that story. Dang it, God, you're so kind and loving and gracious. It's hard for me to get a handle on that. My grandfather used to have in his study at his house a little kind of block that had a saying on it. And I used to read it every time I used to go over there once a week, and I used to read that, and I think, what does that mean? And the simple saying was, love your enemies, it will drive them crazy. And I thought about that through the years, is how we respond to those that think differently than us make a huge difference. How we respond, think, behave around those that think differently than us. Our quick response is, I want to judge them for not believing the right things, doing the right things, behaving in the right ways. That's our simple way of kind of making us feel better, is judging someone because I've clearly got it figured out and they don't, right? But we know that life is full of mystery. Life is full of things we can't figure out all the answers to, but we judge because we know what's comfortable to us. We judge because we want to be right about the way we're living our life. And Jonah's story is he goes off and he pouts. He's off in the hot desert sun. And what does God do? But God provides a bush to shade Jonah. And Jonah's excited about that. At the end, well, thanks, God. Thanks for the shade. I really appreciate that. While Jonah's seeing if Nineveh's going to reverse their decision of redemption. But then God sends a worm to eat up the bush that was giving shade to Jonah. And then Jonah got mad at God again. You gave me shade, and now you're taking away my shade. And there's this whole little story of Jonah trying to figure out his own self, how he relates to other people, and maybe even how Jonah relates to God. And God says, I have all these people, women and children and parents and adults in this community. Do I just leave them be, or do I do something about it? Do I give people an opportunity to find new life in themselves? And the curious thing that happens at the end of Jonah, we never know what Jonah does. The story kind of ends and then kind of the shades close on the story. And we don't know if Jonah comes around or if Jonah kind of sticks to his own set of strict beliefs about what he thinks is important, what God should have done. And it's left to us to decide, well, what would I have done if I was Jonah? That's kind of where the story leaves the reader, is we're kind of stuck in the spot of Jonah. Well, I wonder what would have happened. What would I have done in that story? I mean, it seems easier than ever in our divisive climate to enact judgment on someone else. How dare the Supreme Court do this? How dare these politicians believe this way? That's not right. And we begin enacting judgments, and it's easy to do. But one of the things I think that we find in this text is before we take on the mantle of judgment, we must first take on the mantle of love, of grace. My guess is that when we are judging other people, we don't know the full person that we're judging. When a person slid across the booth at the Pizza Hut and said, have you found Jesus in your life? Are you saved? They made a lot of assumptions that they didn't get to know the real me. They just kind of went off the perceived me. And it's easier for us to make judgments of others. We don't know the full person that's behind the decisions being made. We don't know what kind of health concerns there might be. We don't know what kind of upbringing a person had. We don't know the kind of abuse that might be involved in their family systems. We don't know what kind of strict teaching was enacted to them growing up as a child. We don't know a lot of things about a person that got them to where they are. I think one of the things that Jonah, at least the story of Jonah, invites us to do, invites us to be lovers of people rather than judgers of people. Now, when we disagree with someone, it's much easier to sit over in the judgment seat. It's much easier to do that. Well, I do this and you do that, and we point fingers, and I've got a path that's more open and more forgiving and more gracious. Rather than being over in this spot saying, I don't know everything there is to know about you, but I'm willing to learn. I'm willing to listen. Bruce Reyes Chow, who we did a book study a few years ago, wrote a book called In Defense of Kindness. And in that book, he talks about the defining of the word kindness. It's not like just being sweet to someone else. Kindness is recognized in each person as a created gift, a complex person, and that we are to treat them as though that is true. That each person is complex. There's nuances to every single individual that we meet. Kindness is recognizing that they are a gift of God's creation. They are complex, and we cannot know everything there is to know about that person. The only way through, Bruce Reyes Chow says, is kindness. Or as I would say, is seeking to love that other person despite the differences and the nuances that are not similar to ourselves. We gather every week at this table for worship. And we say that this table is open to anybody. We don't control the table. Jesus was the host of the table, and Jesus did the inviting. We just simply extend the invitation that Jesus made. Is there someone we would turn away from the table because of what we think of them? How we judge them? We say, well, you can come. Oh, not you. The table reminds me of the story of Jonah, that we are to be lovers and not judgers of people. That if we're going to enact the kind of kindness that Bruce Reyes Chow talks about, it means a deep dive into the relationships around us. Jonah never got a chance to meet, to talk, to engage the Ninevites. He didn't go into people's homes, let's have dinner, let's get to know one another. He simply was able to allow his judgment to be judgment because he didn't truly get to know the other. He kept people at a distance from himself in order for him to be safe in the beliefs that he upheld at that moment. Had Jonah dared to truly meet people, truly engage them, to know their heart, then maybe Jonah's journey would be a little different. And maybe so would ours. Maybe instead of beating our fist to our hand and saying, God, you're so full of mercy and steadfast love, I can't stand it. Maybe we say, God, you are so full of mercy and steadfast love, I can't wait to live into it.